afternoon and welcome to the Trust Fundraising Hub, and then welcome to my monthly live where I am open to answering any or all of your questions. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to kind of join us and come on board. I'm just checking that we haven't had any comments elsewhere, which I don't think we have. I have, as ever, got a couple of questions to get us going. Apologies, I've got a bit of a cough, which I didn't know I would have, obviously, or I'd have got myself more drink. So I'm going to kick off, unless anyone wants to do it for me, by answering a question that comes up an awful lot on the group, actually, which is, can you help me find a good trust that will fund my new website, the new laptops that the staff need, that sort of thing, sort of internal infrastructure things. And I think there are a couple of solutions to that. There are rarely, and it very much depends on your cause, some trusts that will support that openly. So if you are in a certain geographic area, you might be lucky enough to have a local trust that would support that kind of thing. The community foundation close to you is a good place to go. Awards for All will sometimes fund that kind of stuff. So there are sort of individual trusts that will fund it, but generally they won't. Like generally, funders want to fund stuff that they see has a direct impact on the beneficiaries. And so that is how you have to frame it. So if your team need new laptops, or your organisation needs some investment in its creaking old website, what you need to do is you need to look at it a different way. So you need to think about why that website will benefit the people your course sets out to support, or animals your course sets out to support, whatever it is. And if you can frame it that way, there are more trusts that will give you money towards meeting that end goal, of which they won't mind if some or all of it goes on internal infrastructure. And the other way to do it is something I'm always harking on about, which is you have your project cost, which is your project officer and the direct money they can spend and all the rest of it. But your project sits within your organisation. So your organisational core costs, or your overheads, whatever it is you want to call them, that you might try and get funded separately, and you may have some success with core grants, can also be divided by the number of projects you have, and so that each project is making a fair and equitable contribution to the core. Now, if your trusts are contributing towards the core, that bit, say £500 of that grant is a contribution to the core, that £500 could be spent going towards your website. It could be spent going on new laptops. You don't have to specify every single penny to a trust if a contribution is openly and transparently going to the core costs. And I do recommend that at the very minimum you put in all of your project budgets a contribution to the core. It's a sort of it's an Excel exercise. Take your number of projects and divide the core by them, and you might just go, well, we've got 4 projects, they're all of equal importance, they're all of equal weight, therefore I'll go 25% across. Or you might say, well, that's not very fair because 20% of our core is on future projects, so we won't count 20%. The answer is it's got to be justifiable and it's got to be fair. So if you've got one massive project and 3 small ones, you probably put more of your core in your massive project, because the project probably takes up more of your chief exec's time, your finance officer's time, and your volunteers' time, and your square footage of your office, if we're ever allowed back in those again. So that's what I would say about that kind of stuff, is please do contribute to your core in your project applications, and that can be a way to support those seemingly unfundable items, really. But there you go. Hello Claire, good timing for your question. National Lottery Community Fund question. You're writing a Reaching Communities application for your support and information service. The service will cost about 250 grand a year. This is an ongoing service. This will be funded from unrestricted income if we don't get any grant funding. Do you have any suggestions about how much we should apply for, length of time we should apply for funding? I have to be honest, Claire, I'm not really familiar enough right now with what the Reaching Communities guidelines say, but is there, I guess I would say, if there's a cap, go for the total, you know, unless that's more than your project. So is there a 250 grand cap on your application for Reaching Communities? It sounds from the way you've worded it that there is. Then apply for that. And I think it's very difficult for you to turn around and say, we'll fund this anyway to reaching communities, because that lessens your need. That's the bit that I think you need to work on. I think it's stronger to say that if you're not successful in this bid, you will seek to find other funding elsewhere, fudge it a bit. Saying, well, we'll fund it out of unrestricted income just makes it sound like it's going to happen with or without you. And that might well be true, but if you look at that from the other person's point of view, they'll be saying, oh, well, you know, if they're going to fund it without us, then what do we need? So the cap is £500,000 over 5 years. Now, I think that the Reaching Communities has quite a verbal first stab nowadays, and you're meant to have an officer, because it changed a few years ago and I stepped away from it because they made it really obvious they weren't interested in consultants being involved, which is why I'm not as familiar with it as I used to be. I would say that's a conversation you need to have with whoever your officer is at National Lottery. My guess would be that you need to, I would on £100,000 a year for 5 years, which is about, you know, well, what is that? 2/5 of your total cost, and then talk about how it will make less of a dent in your overheads if it make less of a dent in your unrestricted funding if they fund £100,000 of it each year, and then you can afford to contribute another £100,000 from your unrestricted funding, or 150. Sorry, that would be a stronger message than saying we're going to just go ahead without you. Or talk about how if you can secure £100,000 a year off them, then you know you can apply to X, Y, and Z for the rest of it. That's how I would word it. But definitely, that is a conversation to have with them rather than guessing. I hope that's helpful. Feels quite waffly. Anyone else got any questions before I leap into something else that's written on my pad? Right. So this is my monthly call for resilience and self-care. I think you would have to be living under a rock to have missed what's been happening in the last few weeks and months in our sector and in broader society. I don't know a single person that hasn't been very affected by the appalling murder of Sarah Everard and what has unfolded as a result of that. And obviously we've got some shocking revelations coming out of NCVO and equally shocking revelations coming out of the Institute of Fundraising over the last week. Obviously try and look after yourself. That's the most important thing. So if you're affected by any of that, please try and find someone and get support as you need it. You don't have to have been directly affected by any of those things to be affected by the news that's coming into us all the time. So it is just shocking, and it is stressful, and it is painful, and we all need to look after ourselves in these times. Particularly, we're still in lockdown. That's, for most people I'm speaking to, and certainly for myself, getting to be definitely at the slog stage. It would be nice to go and unwind with a glass of wine with a friend, but I'm not going to get to do that for a few months, so I've needed to find other ways to unwind. So look after yourself. If you are affected by any of those things, not just NCVO, the hashtag is actually creating a campaign, and you can speak to them in confidence and talk to them about your experiences if you feel that would be helpful to you, if you want to add to the body of knowledge of the fact that as a sector we've been pretty woeful in bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, racism, intersectionality, the whole lot. So if you want to, I know that they are creating a campaign that you can be involved in. And if something at the Institute of Fundraising has happened and you specifically feel you haven't got anywhere to turn at the moment for that, I am a fellow of the Institute of Fundraising, and I feel relatively powerless, I'll be honest with you, but I will advocate for anyone who comes to me and wants me to advocate for them. So that is my offer as a fellow to you, Trust Fundraisers, my peer group. If that is of value to you, please use it, and if not, please don't. I won't be offended if no one calls me. But we need to take care of ourselves, so make sure you're doing everything that's important. You know, make sure you're eating well, make sure you're drinking well, and I don't mean the wine, but you know, wine is better than being dehydrated maybe. Make sure you're getting out and getting some fresh air and sunshine between the rain showers. Make sure you're taking time out with people who love you and who make you feel brilliant. Make sure you're trying to find time to laugh and step away from work. The pressure doesn't seem to be relenting for us fundraisers, does it? You know, we still don't know when old fundraising is going to come back and be normal, and the pressure still feels like it sits here with us in Trust Fundraising. And just, you know, take care of yourself, and please take care of your colleagues as well, and be really mindful of the pressure we've all been under and how that's just not sustainable for a period of time. Rant over. Claire, I'm glad that my pointers were helpful. Yeah, I'm glad you've got a call lined up with the grants officer, and my personal framing would definitely be around a smaller contribution over the years, because it's easier to imagine a scaled back version of a project than it is for a huge scale project to just fall off a cliff after 2 years. I think that's a better sell for a funder, really. But also, as I've said, the contribution from the core looks better if it's spread over the years, but you also then have the freedom to go and apply for other funders as well. So guys, any more questions? Another one that's come up this month, it was our top tip last week, is around style, and I wanted to address that because I think we upset a couple of people, and it certainly wasn't my intention, and I'm sorry for that. What we were getting at is that it is substance over style in trust applications. Totally respect the fact that there are charities out there who can invest in branded content, that they have amazing teams behind them who can support them with layout and branding and fonts and colours, and it looks super professional. What they are also doing is focusing on the content. So they may be branded and beautiful, but they are also great content, or regardless of how famous they are, they simply would not be getting the grants. When you're a smaller charity and you're under pressure to do lots of things, what we wanted to say is focus on the content, not on the design. So the content is always primary to the design, and those big charities are doing that, and they just, you know, that's second nature to them, and they're also doing branding and design, and that's great. But what is important is that you are making it easy for that foundation to say yes to you, and you're doing that through your words, not through a range of colours, not through anything else. The other thing to be careful about with branding is making sure that you remain accessible. So you're not squeezing your font sizes down because you really want to put that picture in, because, you know, it needs to be easy to read. I'm quite short-sighted. I struggle less than a 12-point font, and I'm only just 40. Well, actually, I'm just 41. But you know, given that most trustees are a lot older, that they will have age-related sight problems, you need to be cognizant of people's ability to read, and the fact that your eyes get tired when you've read a lot and you're asking them to read a lot. And also think about contrast. So the sight loss charities are really good at helping you understand what makes good contrast. So white font on a dark blue background is great. Black font on a white background is the normal, and that's also great. But you know, be careful of things that reduce contrast from a reading and accessibility point of view, and also be careful of things that might fall foul of people who are colourblind as well. So just always worth remembering, it is content first, style second, and if you've only got time to do one, please focus on content and just leave it there and get the job done. You know, done is better than perfect. Always remember that, because we are all so woefully under-resourced that we need to remember that. Claire, anyone else has any questions? You've got another one. Ask as many questions as you want. Do you know of any free resources except for Turn to Us, which I've already looked at, to look for funders who will fund individuals directly? So, in the good old days, and hopefully they are coming back soon, libraries are the best place to go to for that. Libraries hold, and so there are 3 libraries within walking distance of my house, and I would go to the biggest of the 3. I would assume that the main town library was the one, not the sort of the satellite out of town ones. Libraries hold that sort of resource, and they hold it for individuals, but there's nothing stopping you as a professional going in. So decent libraries will all have a copy of Grants Online, the DSC's Grants Online, and DSC do an individual's version of exactly the same. You could, in the good old days when we could go places, you could access those by going to the DSC's offices. You could access all three of their funding things, all four, in fact, they had a government one in the day. You could access all of DSC's funding databases for free by going to DSC's offices, and you could access them by going to a library. Now, I think libraries are beginning to open from the middle of April in England. Don't quote me, not a government spokesperson, could have misunderstood the rules. Also, don't tell me if it's not true, too depressing. But libraries is where I would go to, Claire. I wouldn't know how to access that without paying for those resources otherwise. There's probably someone who's much better at doing charity commission searches than me, who could search looking for grants for individuals as opposed to grants for organisations. But apart from paying for the resource, those are the points I'd say, Claire. Hopefully that helps. Heather, you're doing quite well with small funding bids of up to £10,000. Well, I wouldn't say 10,000 is small. When you look at this, when you map out how many funders give at that point, 10 grand is edging into big. So well done, Heather. How can you make the leap to multi-year bids? Wow. How do you make the leap? And in the same way as you're getting accustomed to applying before it starts, you have to make sure that your multi-year application is in before it starts. It's easier to make fresh. Right, my computer just told me I was offline, so either you've just seen me have a mini panic or I've frozen. So hopefully I froze and you didn't watch my... I'm going to start again, Heather. You're doing really well. 10 grand is much bigger than you think in the scale of where the midpoint is between small grants and big grants. Starting by asking them for one-off gifts, stewarding them really well and proving to a funder that you're trustworthy is absolutely the right way to get multi-funding. Obviously, not all funders do it, so look at their criteria. If you're building relationships with key trusts over time, if you're getting repeat one-off gifts, that's when you start picking up the phone and going, actually, what I could really do with it is a bit of certainty over a 3-year view. Is it possible to have that conversation with you? And that's if it isn't in their criteria already. If it is in their criteria already and you're getting one-off grants, still try and pick up the phone and go, I want to move to asking you for multi-year funding. I'm not sure if you feel that we're right yet. I don't want to waste your time, don't want to waste my time. Please, could you give me some feedback? And basically, you've got to build your project out over, say, 3 to 5 years. And so you're going to apply for a larger sum because you're going to ask for the maximum they will give each year for 3 or 5 years. You might get it, you're more likely to get a percentage in those scenarios. You know, if you've been getting 10 grand and you go and ask for 10 grand a year for 5 years, you're suddenly getting 50 grand off someone. They might knock it down to 7.5 or 5 or whatever they feel is appropriate, so that they're spreading their risk over a number of years, but they're reducing their annual risk to you. But it is just about relationships and conversation in a lot of those multi-year conversations. I mean, I guess the exceptions are reaching communities. They do multi-year applications. That's exactly what they're encouraging. So if you're eligible for reaching communities, it is worth getting in touch with whoever your local grants officer is and just having that chat. As I said earlier in this live with Claire, a few years ago, they made it really clear that they weren't interested in organisations that were paying consultants to do applications. They were happier to have a more informal process that sort of excluded professional fundraisers in that respect. So I definitely think, Heather, worth picking up the phone to Reaching Communities if you're in their criteria and talking to them about multi-year funding. Because if you've got a Reaching Communities bid for, say, 20% of your thing, you could then hook a lot more multi-year bids on that. So this organisation is already paying 20% of everything for the next 5 years. Would you consider a contribution over a similar period of time? Deborah, my charity has received several donations from a London-based foundation. Would love to be able to share the name to see if anyone else has experience of them, but they are very evasive as to why they're supporting us and won't engage at all. I have tried to research who else they've funded and also at Company's House, but it all seems quite mysterious. The grants are 10 to 20, it's unsolicited. So Deborah, I mean, you are welcome to share the name. I can't say that I will probably know them. I would recommend just doing a post on the Trust Fundraising Hub. Has anyone else ever had a grant from such and such? I'd love to have a coffee with you, a virtual coffee with you to talk about that. The truth is that there are lots of family foundations where people just don't want, they know why we're asking. They know that it's part of a solicitation program and that we want to develop a relationship, and they're just not interested. Like, they just want to give and go away. Also, are they registered with the Charity Commission in England and Wales, or Scotland, obviously, or Northern Ireland, or are they registered in the Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey, which is significantly more opaque, although about to become less so. Be really clear before you write that post that they haven't said they want to remain anonymous. If they want to remain anonymous, you probably shouldn't post that publicly. Probably something less public, just in case, because we do have grant makers in this group, and you don't want to upset them. You know, just if they, I guess ultimately what I'm saying is you need to respect what they say. Lizzie, how do you get live feed subtitles? So, can't do it on the mobile, which I learned to my cost when I did my little thing about rates last week, because I've then had to go through and do a blinking transcript, which is well annoying. But when you go into live, there is, I'll see if I can see it. I probably can't do it while I'm live. Before you go live, underneath the screen of yourself, you scroll down and there are some options. One is about view, I think it's called. I'll do a screen grab after this and post it. And you can turn on live subtitles on the thing, which is just a godsend for me, because otherwise I'd be having to do a transcript, and I and ah too much, and no one wants to see that really. And it's automatic on Facebook to do this. I haven't paid for any extra service to do this. It's just something that came up. Deborah, you mentioned the name and then you've taken the name off, so I'm going to leave that with you. And just kind of double check it's okay to name them beforehand. I don't recognise the name though. I saw it, and I'll be honest, it's not one I've heard of. And the thing is that we are accustomed to being able to research people because we can go to our competitors and see the trust that funded them in their annual report and stuff. That's actually not a legal requirement. If they want anonymity, you're welcome to give it to them. So I'm afraid that's the deal there. This live is auto posted onto the group, but also we are now putting them on, the historical ones, onto our YouTube channel. If you search for Money Tree Fundraising on YouTube, we've got a channel there. So historic Q&As are on there, and other hints and tips and videos that we've created over time. There's a load of resources directly aimed at trust fundraising, and obviously as a consultancy we also do major donor and capital appeals, so there's that stuff there that might be slightly less relevant to you lot. We also try and curate third-party content, so it's not just us doing talking heads. There's a load of stuff on there that we think is useful in terms of storytelling, TED Talks, resilience, or all kind of like the holistic view of what makes us brilliant at our jobs and what keeps us healthy enough to be brilliant at our jobs. So do have a look at our YouTube channel if you get a chance. Still no more questions, so I am going to say goodbye and thank you, and we will see you next month. And that will be in the group in due course with the exact date. But bye for now. Have a great afternoon.